Sounds all right to you?
Mm-hmm.
Good. Good morning. It's April 22nd, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. I am Cory Morgan. Happy Earth Day. You can tell that global warming is really moving along thanks to that late April snowstorm we're all enjoying. So this is the Western Standard's daily show that I get to come on, rant, rave, share. It's live. We run Monday to Friday, 11:30 a.m. till 1 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And yes, I appreciate you guys coming on. Comments, they're welcome, guys. Bring them on, throw them in there. That's what I like about the live aspect, is being able to see people like Debbie there from Nova Scotia. Know that you guys are out there. Know that I'm not talking to the air right now. And having that interaction, you know, send guests my way, send questions towards my guests, send questions towards me. Have discussions with each other. I've seen some really neat discourse going on in the comment thread. But again, as always, try to keep it pretty civil, guys. You know, take politics seriously. Don't take it personally. Let's, you know, enjoy this experience together somewhat. It can be productive. And we can still be somewhat jerks to each other. That's what I do. That's my nature. Those who follow me on Twitter are well aware of that. So let's see. What do we got? Yes, this global warming going on in the snowstorm. I got a couple of really good guests today. I got Colin Craig of secondstreet.org. He's going to be talking about, they've got an initiative with survivors of socialism. They put out a series of videos. They've talked to people who have actually lived in socialist countries and them explaining how enjoyable it really was for them. You know, there's so many spoiled North American hipsters and kids who think socialism is such a bright idea. They really should listen to some of the people who actually got to fully enjoy it. After that, I'm going to have Western Standard columnist Dave Makichuk on. Dave's been on a number of times. We're going to talk about, he wrote a column on, again, it's still going on, that thin blue line thing, but it's happening with police forces across the country, and it's still going on in Calgary. They're still fighting back and forth on it, but it's a symbol of a much larger issue, and that's that disconnect between administrators and the woke and police forces, you know, and the morale problems they're starting to have and such. So it'll be a good conversation. But yes, as per the title, I saw one of the commenters. This one caught me off guard. So we need to have a serious conversation about the ongoing efforts of the extremely woke in trying to get at our children in the classrooms. Now, we've been watching the debates in the USA as the absurd and divisive critical race theory has been pushed onto children in classrooms. And rest assured, we're not immune to such idiocy and lunacy up here. I'm going to read a few paragraphs from a book put out by a number of educators. It's called Rethinking Ethnic Studies. It's promoted by a union-driven group called Rethinking Schools. Now, this is American, but it's all the same push coming out up here as well. This publication won some awards, by the way. So this is an introduction of the book that I found on the Amazon site. As part of a growing nationwide movement to bring ethnic studies into K-12 classrooms, Rethinking Ethnic Studies brings together many of the leading teachers, activists, and scholars in the movement to offer examples of ethnic studies frameworks, classroom practices, and organizing at the school district and statewide levels. So yes, this is, making no bones about it, this is a book about how to teach our children and what they want to do. There's no secret that their agenda is to get into our children's minds, and that's fair. It's a democratic world, and we have the right to promote agendas and goals, even if they're crazy. The problem is that these crazy people are actually being taken seriously and succeeding. So here's some key quotes from the opening within that book. I'll show just how nuts these people are, who are not only, again, wanting to teach our children, they're succeeding in getting access to them. And thanks, by the way, to Jonathan K. for tweeting this out so I could see this beauty. So this is from the book. You know, don't throw rocks at me, guys. I'm reading their quotes. This book is written in English, a linguistic vestige of settler colonialism and white supremacy in the United States. It's the language of victors and was used to carry out attempted cultural genocide. We recognize that when we use English to communicate, we're fundamentally bound by the politics of racism, patriarchy, sexism, and capitalism, and colonialism buried within the English language. Fundamentally, we are trying to use what historically has been a tool for domination as a tool for resistance and liberation. This is in their book, you guys. Now, yeah, I'm off their quotes. This is in their book. Where do you begin with this ridiculous crap? And that's what it is crap. It's like hearing the ridiculous and growing land acknowledgments that we're constantly hearing. It's all linked together, guys. It's about us being ashamed of who we are and what we're doing. Nobody's allowed to begin any event or ceremony without beginning with what's essentially an apology for the actions of people hundreds of years ago. We're being trained to hang our heads in shame with everything we do. Not content, though, with these land acknowledgments, the woke can't speak without a groveling apology for even speaking English. And that was what was in that introduction to the book. Basically saying, and that's what they said, if we speak English, we're automatically racist. It says we are fundamentally bound by the politics of racism, patriarchy, sexism, and all the isms that these idiotisms have got going on. And they want to teach our kids. So you're guilty no matter what you do. And don't forget, they included capitalism in there. Well, this paperback sells for $39.03 plus shipping at Amazon. You'd think they'd be giving it away for free, wouldn't they, in this great socialist world? But apparently capitalism is selective. Now, we're seeing the term settler being used a lot by contemporary woke idiots, more and more, actually. Not just the fringe idiots, though. We're talking about prominent people and politicians on the left. But Elizabeth May sure likes saying it all the time. And if that's what they're saying, if you aren't a full-blooded Indigenous person, you're expected to wear the term settler. Even if you're a fifth-generation North American. You know, where does this attitude go? Does this mean we're supposed to get, I mean, I've heard that thing from social media heated people talk about, just get on the boats and go back. Where? I was born here. I got nowhere to go back to. I'm sorry, get over yourselves, you guys. I'm as Indigenous as anybody else here, as are any other Canadians. But this is where they're going. Do these woke understand, though, just how racist and divisive they actually are? The sins of the father concept and groveling religion of self-debasement over historical events from hundreds of years ago. It's a social scourge, people. Children are susceptible to ideas. Our first 18 years of life are our most important and formative ones. We build our values and our thought structures during that period. That's why these extremists always desperately want to get into the minds of our children as early as possible while they pursue agendas that rational adults reject. What these woke lunatics want to do is instill a sense of shame in every person who's not of color in North America. And they want to teach our children that there's some sort of settlers on stolen land. And that even speaking English is a sin and an affront to minorities. And keep in mind, most of the minorities in Canada speak English as their first language as well. Never mind that these children had no opportunity or realistic need to learn or speak any other language besides English, or that they, of course, had no choice in where they were born. It doesn't matter. The woke wants these kids to grow up with a sense of self-loathing and feeling they're responsible for every social ill of today. Teaching a race of children that they are inferior or guilty of original sin is nothing new. It was done to black children who were in slavery for a long time. That's how perverse this is, though. That's what they're doing. Two wrongs don't make a right, you nutcases. I mean, looking back at those practices, we should have learned how abhorrent they are. We should actually be truly starting to become colorblind. But instead, the woke are going the opposite way. They've moved so far out in the left field, they want to expand racial divisions and instill a sense of either merit or shame based on your skin color. So backward and so clearly evil, we should be decrying these nuts from the rooftops. Instead, political leaders hide from this ugly, slow creeping towards true institutional racism, because if they dare criticize it, they'll be labeled as racists themselves. Yes, being critical of racism makes you a racist. In the bizarro world of the woke, we need to end the politicization of educational curriculums. It is turned into an ideological battleground, and the people pushing the extremes could very well create entire dysfunctional generations if they continue like this unchecked. Legislated curriculum needs to be based on nothing else aside from the basics: math, language, history, all of those things. Easier said than done, but it has to happen. The woke can certainly open their own separate schools based on social justice if they like. Let them draw the interest and participation of students based on their teachings. Let it be choice. Likewise with any religious teachings, if you want to have it in school. We're going down, though, right now an ugly road. Unions and left-wing radicals are fighting for the minds of our children, and they must be stopped. As can be seen from what I read, these extremes are real, unreasonable, and they're becoming part of the mainstream in the educational world. Right or left, we have to stop these ideologues. We got to keep them away from the education of our children. We're going to be paying for this for generations. So there's my rant that was obviously quite racist because I did the entire thing in English. So my apologies to those offended. Actually, you know I couldn't give a rat's flying whatever if anybody's upset. All right, let's bring Eva Sudik in for a news check-in, maybe calm things down a little bit. And see how that's going over there. Hey, Eva, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Cory?
I'm pretty good, actually, you know. But again, Jonathan Kay shared that and the vein got pulsing, and I just had to share it.
Well, at the end of the news check-in, I'll give you some more updates on what the school system is teaching our children. So
Right.
might get your blood boiling again. In other news, I heard that you might have gotten a gun or a rifle or something.
I haven't gotten it yet, but I'm working towards expanding my collection of perfectly legal firearms, yes.
And what was the price for that I heard you mentioning earlier?
Oh, we won't go into that, but there's always things one has to do in order to maintain a good relationship, push and pull within a household. So,
okay, a household like Downton Abbey, correct?
yeah, something like that.
Okay. So in the news today, the Treasury Board figures have shown that federal IT systems data breaches occur once a day on average. Those are separate from the thousands of hack attempts occurring every minute of every hour in our federal government. We have a story on the CRA misconduct and whistleblowers that emails were leaked. The information was of sensitive nature on CRA managers' preferable tax treatment. Another one, the Ontario Liberal Party leader, Stephen Del Duca, is campaigning to ban firearms, but the Canadian Shooting Sports Association has stepped up saying that that's actually a federal issue and he shouldn't be campaigning for provincial political gain if it's not even in his reach. Another one out of Ontario, a woman is suing Pornhub after 3 videos of her appeared on their site. It is a $500 million class action lawsuit that's being pursued on the basis of that Pornhub made these uploads without her knowledge or consent. Melanie has an exclusive up where she has compiled information on nearly 24 food processing facilities that have suffered fires, explosions, and plane crashes. These are across Canada and the US, and just as recent as last night. Most of these incidents happened within the past 4 to 6 months, but they trace back all the way to January 2021. They are going to add to the accumulating food shortages and food prices that are rising. And I have one on the Toronto Zoo that has released a video showing how they've started vaccinating animals for COVID-19. The really interesting thing is that the zoo is claiming that these are voluntary and consensual vaccinations because the animals come to the zookeeper and present an arm or a paw and get the vaccination voluntarily themselves, and that they are an active part of their own health. You can watch the video and see a hippo and a red panda and a tiger and more animals voluntarily getting vaccinations for COVID-19.
Voluntarily, they weren't shaking a carrot. The animal wasn't coming for something else first. They just came up and said, "Hey, I'm due for my shot. Fix me up."
Well, you see them holding pieces of meat and food for the animals, and then the animals like putting their body against the cage. Please give me the vaccine now.
I didn't, I thought that there was always, animals were incapable of doing consent. But I mean, I guess if you can interpret voluntary, there's an old story about, what some Scotsmen used to do with sheep. If you got them towards a cliff, they're going to back towards you. And I guess that could be considered consent for something. But if your choice is between the cliff and the Scotsman, they sometimes choose the, one or the other.
I actually have another story on animals and consent. I wrote an exclusive, it just came out today, on a Calgary grade 8 classroom where in their sex ed class, where they hired an outside company from Calgary, students were told not to have sex with animals because animals cannot consent.
Well, glad they sorted that out. Boy, I mean, the kids were going to rush out otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, giving those ideas to grade 8 students sounds like a great idea. And the speaker also did not mention any legal repercussions or what bestiality is either. So very interesting.
Oh man, it's world. It does get insane, but I mean, I don't know if they're well-meaning or what. I mean, do we really, it used to be a battle when I hate dating myself, but even having sex education whatsoever, I don't think it was such a bad idea. There was a lot of uptight parents who were perhaps just not informing their children of some of the natural developments and processes as they aged and entered puberty. It was good to give the kids the physiological things. I don't recall us ever needing to be told not to meddle with the animals that way. Didn't think it was part of the curriculum.
Yeah, I looked into the curriculum and I looked into what this center downtown gives, what their curriculum is too. And it just says things along the lines of socially informing students and what the norms of our society are now. And they also told the students in the class to experiment with their pronouns and see what feels different. So that's what our sex education is now for kids and keeping them safe.
Oh, good. I'm certain we're in for a generation of very well-informed and functional kids in the future. Well, thanks for bringing me up to date on these things. Eva, you working on more stuff before the weekend hits here?
There's lots coming out for the weekend. We're all working hard here, but I don't have the details yet.
Okay. Well, thanks for checking in. And thankfully, I don't have to change any plans. I already knew that I shouldn't mess with animals. But any listeners who perhaps didn't realize that animals can't consent for those sorts of things, now you know. So thank our educational system.
Yes. Thanks so much for having me on, Cory.
All right. I'll talk to you later, Eva. But that's what I mean. Like, where does this agenda come from? Where do these people come from? And again, it's not just fringe lunatics. They're teaching our kids. And then they, you can tie all this stuff together. That story about them at the news. Okay, I'm not going to get into the battle on whether it's a good idea or a bad idea to vaccinate zoo animals. I think in general, it's probably a good idea. And yes, even for COVID, though I haven't heard of any COVID killing off zoo animals, but whatever. But don't make up this bizarro world that these animals are so self-aware and so intelligent that they came up and offered their arm and gave consent. They came to get a banana and you stabbed them with a needle. I'm sure if they could choose just the banana and not the needle, they probably would have. And hey, I understand that you're not going to be able to get an animal to submit to a vaccination without coercion of some kind, food or reward. Fair enough. But quit making up these bizarre stories. These are our intellectual leaders. These are the doctors. These are the biologists that are raising animals. Crazy. But I mean, think about the people who are raising our children in our schools, and we should be pretty disturbed there too, as I was started with that rant earlier. We've got a really weird world coming together, guys. I guess it gives me lots to rant about. So yes, this is where I will remind you guys, though, that hey, we are an independent news outlet and lots of stories coming out, lots of stories that have already come out, great columns, great opinion stuff. And we need you guys to keep doing that. And that's where subscriptions come in. Subscriptions have been fantastic. They've been coming up in great numbers. And we need to keep it going, though. I mean, we're getting reporters all across the country, and we are expanding our reach. And I thank you if you've already subscribed. If you haven't already, guys, check it out, westernstandardonline.com/membership. $10 a month. Hey, you get another $10 off if you use the coupon code TRIGGERED. It's a great deal. And $99 a year if you're going to go out for an annual one. And that helps us. Everything when you establish yourself as a subscriber, it gives us more stability. It allows us to keep going. We will not take tax dollars. We've made no bones about that. Not going to happen. But the only way we can keep independent is through you guys. So you've been fantastic so far. If you haven't subscribed already, guys, please get on there and subscribe. Now, the other part is advertisers, and I do have to speak about Bitcoin Well. They have been a fantastic sponsor for this show for quite some time now. They're an Alberta company. They are a, bricks and mortar company. People worry about virtual things. This is a digital, currency company. They're helping you with digital currencies, particularly Bitcoin. And you worry about that. Like, where are these guys? Is this some call center across the planet or some office in a guy's basement? No, this is a real company in Western Canada, and they offer one-on-one personal service. You can sit down with a consultant, just like you would with any other financial advisor, face-to-face, and walk through the whole Bitcoin process. I mean, whether you want a small investment or a big investment, or maybe it's not even for you, the point is they're there to show you how to get involved in digital currencies, how it's practical for you, and what you can do with it. Check them out, guys. They're a fantastic sponsor. BitcoinWell.com. And hey, take control of your money. Okay, I see our first guest in the lobby. We'll get on to the bright and light subject of survivors of socialism and bring Mr. Colin Craig from secondstreet.org on board here and have a conversation. Colin's been on before. Hey, Colin, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing, Cory?
Good. I appreciate you coming on. I know it wasn't too long ago when we had you on before, but you guys have done another great release, and it certainly would like to talk more about it. And What I talked about before, just to explain with your organization, is you really get a lot of first-person accounts on issues. So you're not just hearing from some academic, you're not putting up press releases. You get people out, whether it's healthcare or in this case, socialism, to talk firsthand on how they experience those things, right?
Well, that's exactly it. We're a think tank, but what we do that's a little bit different is we really try and focus in on telling the stories behind the numbers, because of course it's one thing to hear politicians make claims about how different policies are affecting people. It's another thing to talk to people and say, well, how does this affect you? So we do a lot of research, we gather a lot of data, and then we try and talk to people that kind of represent those numbers so that people can understand how things are affecting them. So as you alluded to, we've got a new project out right now. It's called Survivors of Socialism. And where this came from was sort of this reality in Canada, at least, that you have a lot of people that will speak favorably about socialism and communism, even university professors, some politicians, activists, and so forth. And yet we were certainly aware that there's a disconnect between people that, talk about these ideas and people who have actually lived under them. So we thought, well, let's go out and talk to people that have come to Canada from countries like Cuba, Venezuela, the former Soviet Union, China, and so forth. And so we're doing a lot of little video stories talking to them about it. But one of the things that we thought would be interesting would be to ask them, are there any policies in Canada that concern you, that maybe remind you of the communist and socialist countries that you fled? And we did a survey to ask Canadians, or those people that came from those countries, what they thought.
Great. And it's a great interactive map, and I see it's growing. You've got other ones coming out. Like if people go to secondstreet.org and look on this thing with the socialism, there's a number of course, hammer and sickles all over, and some of them are in red from all the different individuals in different countries around the world, from where presumably you've got a video from somebody who lived there then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly it. We're gathering more and more stories. So right now people can see a story from a lady from Cuba, Amy Despain, who came to Canada several years ago from Cuba. She talks about the indoctrination that she faced at a young age. She talks about sort of the daily challenge. The top thing on everyone's mind was, what am I doing for food? What am I doing for breakfast? What am I doing for lunch? What am I doing for dinner? It was just a different world, obviously, than here in Canada, where access to food is certainly not as scarce. So we've got Amy's story. We've got a story from a lady who came from Romania, a gentleman that came from Latvia, which was under the former Soviet Union. We've got Marco Navarrogini tells about his experience leaving Nicaragua, what his parents went through. So we've got those. We're putting up more stories. We talked to someone who, they're not Canadian, but they started up a human rights organization in Venezuela, so we could learn a little bit about what's been happening in Venezuela. And yeah, we've got all kinds of content there, little videos that people can watch. We've got a policy brief that people can read if they want to go through this, the survey, and the other research that we conducted. And I think the interesting thing is, when we talked to people that came from these countries, we said, what concerns you, if any, about any policies in Canada? And the number one concern that we kept seeing in the responses was restrictions on freedom of speech. And I thought, oh, this is surprising. I didn't really know what to expect when we went into this project, but that was the most common thing that people said. It's efforts by the government, many named two former federal pieces of legislation, Bill C-10 and 36. And then, I mean, those are coming back in new forms. I believe both didn't pass under the previous government before the election, but they're coming back. But also there's sort of a recognition that it's not just the government that's restricting free speech. It's what we're doing to ourselves as a society with cancel culture. So I thought, well, that's really interesting. Out of all the policies that governments work on, it was restrictions on free speech that was the most concerning to people that came from those nations.
Well, unfortunately, I mean, when authoritarian regimes, that's often a tactic, actually, is getting, people to turn against each other, people to call out each other, report on each other, and it builds a culture of fear. And that's sort of, I think, what happens with this cancel culture that's been fostered. If you take somebody, they're not saying something illegal, but we're just going to completely publicly shame you and drag you through the streets, figuratively anyways, and ensure you toe the line.
Yeah, I think cancel culture overall is a pretty terrible thing. it's creating a world where people can't be people, because of course people make mistakes, and we're not allowing people opportunities to admit that they've made a mistake, to maybe learn from it, to apologize, move on. You know, you hear of companies sometimes where they've had an employee for 20, 25, 30 years, whatever it is, a long-standing employee, has done good things for the company, and he or she makes a mistake, slip of the tongue, whatever, they're out. And I don't think that's the type of world that we should be living in. You know, if it's something overly horrendous, of course, but so often it seems like these comments are things that really should be addressed by maybe someone making an apology or being dealt with in some other way, rather than just simply firing and canceling people from society.
Well, yeah, and again, aside from the consequences, just that mentality of the pitchforks and torches, you know, the way people just suddenly gather and swarm. And I mean, the government's not behind it necessarily, but they're not trying to stop it either.
No, and you know, I think sometimes you do see governments making comments where people are all getting painted with the same brush, and they're all being criticized, and there sort of is this effort to kind of cancel others. I mean, you see it in politics quite a lot, right? It's a blood sport, and you know, a politician makes a mistake, and according to the other side, it's the worst thing in the world, right? They're coming down on that individual. And I mean, that's politics, but you know, when you extend that to civil society more broadly, I think it's very problematic. Even in politics, I think we need to recognize that politicians are human, and they will make mistakes. And I think sometimes they deserve an opportunity to apologize and note that, you know, they said something incorrectly or whatever, and move on.
So going further, and I've seen a few people commenting about socialism, and they've actually two different commenters / communism. They're closely related, and how do you distinguish between the two? Like, I worked with a Bulgarian surveyor actually, and he was very, again, conservative, and he was very upset because he was saying, these are the things I came to Canada to escape, and I'm seeing them creeping in here. One of his rants, he would always go on about too. He said, in Bulgaria, we were not communist, we were socialist. That was he would distinguish that difference, not saying it was a good thing, but what is the difference between the two?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's interesting because I don't know that there's a hard and fast definition that everyone agrees to. And when do you draw that line statistically where you change from sort of more of a free market state to, okay, now you're officially socialist? Is it when, you know, X% of the economy is run by the government? I mean, I don't think anyone's ever really come up with that. But a couple of the things that we noticed was that when you look at the definition from the dictionary of what socialism is and communism, they both have the means of production are run by the state. So the government's out there owning factories, it's owning things like farms and so forth. There's a heavy role for the government in terms of the generation of the goods that we use day to day. Communism seems to go further in that it's, you know, getting rid of private property, period. It's this sort of socialist, this utopian world where everything is kind of shared and people sing kumbaya together. What makes it even murkier is that sometimes you'll find states that say that they're socialist. Cuba identifies as a socialist country in its constitution. It's run by the Communist Party. And the former Soviet Union was the same way, right? The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics was the name of the nation. And yet it was run by the Communist Party. So you run into some discrepancies there. They're both similar, going in the same direction. And so that's why we thought, well, let's talk to people from both. I think, you know, probably a lot of your listeners and viewers are aware that the outcomes are very similar. They're tragic. There are so many cases of human suffering and misery from these regimes because fundamentally the structure just doesn't work. We've seen it time and time again. According to the United Nations right now, there's 6 million people that have fled Venezuela because of you know, the way that the things are right now. It's Hugo Chavez several years ago brought in this you know, socialist paradise. Things unraveled pretty quickly. I think it's the Human Rights Foundation, which has noted that the average Venezuelan has lost something like 20 pounds because there just simply isn't enough food to go around. And that's a country that's blessed with oil and gas reserves. So structurally, once you start to go down this collectivist road and invoke things like central planning and a heavy role for the state, things unravel pretty quickly. Obviously, we know what happened with the former Soviet Union. I think what's interesting is when you look at a country like China, it's obviously a dictatorship, and it lacks human rights, but they did make a transition towards the late 1900s from a centrally planned economy to more of a market-based system, and things improved. And we've got some data in our report about what happened with the agricultural sector once they changed the incentive structure. You had the same land, same people, you change the incentive structure and suddenly output goes up. So you can see that countries do better when they move towards more of a free market system. And certainly, I don't think free markets and capitalism are perfect, but they've certainly done a lot better historically than socialist and communist regimes, and all the data shows that.
Well, yeah, and pivoting back to Venezuela, because it's such a grand example kind of how bad policy can overrun no matter how good your resources are. There's a great meme out there I think I saw around saying, oh, look at this, we got this perfect country, lots of oil and gas, coastal access, shipping, beautiful climate, nice landscape. Let's just add a couple drops of socialism, and then bang, of course, it shows the city all run down. And it's kind of funny, but it makes a very valid point. I mean, by every other measure with what they have for resources and fantastic, well-educated people, they should be prospering. They should be one of the strongest countries on earth. And due to bad government policy, nobody can claim otherwise. They are in misery down there, and it really should never have had to happen.
It's brutal. It is absolutely brutal. There is so much human suffering that has been caused by this ideology that's clearly failed. It doesn't work. All the numbers show it. There's a bit of a debate over how many people died under communist regimes. On the low end, you've got one of Jimmy Carter's former advisors saying it's 60 million. On the other end, we've seen an estimate as high as 150 million. Like it's a pretty big red flag that this is not a road you want to go down. And yet we continue to hear this idea that we should be, implementing these policies and that. You often hear people say, well, look at Denmark and Sweden and that. And they're not socialist countries. They are market-based countries. So you look at IKEA. It's not the government that runs IKEA in Sweden. It's a private company that runs it. You look at Lego from Denmark. It's not run by the government. That's a private company. You have private companies that are owning the means of production. They're competing fiercely. And these countries actually have lower business taxes than Canada. Where they differ is that they impose higher taxes on citizens through higher sales taxes and personal income taxes. And so that's how they pay for the generous welfare state. And if advocates want to say that that's what we should do, they can say that, sure, but be clear about it. Those aren't socialist countries. And Denmark's former prime minister, even he was invited to speak at Harvard, and he made that point quite clearly. He said, let me be clear, Denmark is not a socialist country. So I think this is the type of information that people need to learn about, I think, especially young people, because I don't think they're being told the whole story. And that's why we thought that this website is a good resource for people to go, and they can hear directly from people who have lived under socialist and communist countries. They can learn about sort of the Scandinavian model. They can learn about what's happening in Venezuela and other nations. Yeah,
well, and in Sweden, I'm glad you brought that up. You got ahead of me with Sweden and Denmark, as people point to that, and they do have large social programs, a social safety net. But yeah, Sweden's free market economy is actually more unrestrained than Canada's is as far as that goes. But I mean, you could call some of it elements of socialism if you're going to tax individuals that heavily. That's where it gets, as you said, fuzzy. I mean, between socialism, communism, free market, it's all a matter of degree of government intervention, really. I mean, at what point do you draw a line and call it one or the other? It's all the same concept, though.
Yeah, it's where you just have a larger and larger and larger role for the state. Where exactly you draw that line, I don't think anyone has ever defined it. I'd be interested if someone did. But like I say, sort of the definitions that we observed pointed more towards the means of production. And obviously, Marx and Engels talked quite a bit about that when they were espousing or writing the Communist Manifesto and having the state own and control the means of production and then centrally planning everything. And you saw that in Cuba too. Once the revolutionaries took over, they nationalized a number of the farms that were owned internationally. They took over the Havana Club Rum Company at gunpoint. We've got that in one of our videos talking about what happened there. So it's, you know, it's this mentality that the state's just going to come in and take over different companies and they're going to run these things. It doesn't work out well. And, you know, I think Canadians can kind of understand this if they think about what happens when governments try to run things here in Canada. I mean, quite often the results are not that good when they're running commercial enterprises. You know, we like to point to an example in Ontario of a hospital that's running a Tim Hortons and it's lost over $1 million running a Tim Hortons. So lots of examples like that. And, you know, certainly that doesn't mean there's not a role for the state in our lives, but that it needs to be structured differently, and people tend to do better when it's more limited.
Yeah, and you don't hear stories of people who boarded rickety rafts to try and get away from Miami and get out to Havana. It didn't happen. People wanted to escape. I mean, and that's a commonality among all of these countries when they finally collapse under socialism. And a lot of it is incremental in how they bring it in. That's part of where it's fuzzy too. It gets dangerous. And as I said, I really appreciate it because we listen to a lot of academics or even listen to a lot of students or recent graduates who talk about how great socialism is and how fantastic it is, but almost invariably these are people who have never actually experienced it. So it's so important with, you know, organizations like yours getting it out there, just talking one-on-one with people actually lived through it and get a real review on just how fun it is to live in that system.
Yeah, I mean, you make a great point there with people trying to escape Cuba. There's a story, this has happened many times, where Cubans have actually climbed into the wheel wells of airplanes. So before an airplane takes off, they climb up into the landing gear area and they try and hide out there. And then when the plane lands in some other free country, they can escape. Problem, of course, is that airplanes fly so high that people can die from hypothermia. You can die from not having enough oxygen. You can die when the landing gear comes down and you fall out. But that's the length that people are going to in Cuba to be free to get away from the socialist regime there. But it's not just Cuba. It's you know, you think back to after World War II and Germany was split between East and West Germany. Well, people were trying to escape in one direction pretty much, and that was from the east side, the communist side, over to the western side. Over 100,000 people tried to escape. You look at North Korea, the North Korean peninsula, there's the famous image on social media where they show it at night. You've got South Korea, which is a market-based economy. It's lit up, nice and bright, lots of energy things happening in that country. The north side is dark because people are living in poverty. The centrally planned north side simply does not work. So we talk about these examples in the report because we think they're important. They're easy to understand. Well, wait, why is everyone trying to get away from these countries and go this way? That's the common pattern. So if this system is so good, why is everyone trying to get away from it? And so, yeah, I think it's an interesting report. If any of your viewers know someone who they think needs to learn the other side, especially young people, I'd encourage them to visit the site, read the report, take a look at the videos, and hopefully they'll get something of use out of it.
Great. And actually, since we got the viewers going too, I don't know, are you still seeking more people to expand and interview and talk about those sorts of things who've come from the Eastern
Yeah,
Bloc?
that would be great. Yeah, no, we're trying to talk to people from different parts of the world, different countries. So yeah, by all means, people can go to the site, look at the map, and if they see we haven't done a discussion yet with someone from that country, by all means, shoot me an email and be pleased to hear your story.
Great. Well, and thanks for coming on. And just to review then, where can we find out where your project is and where to find out, you know, future projects and things such as that, your social media presence and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so people go to secondstreet.org. They can find the work that I just talked about. They can find our research onto other areas. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, all the usual social media channels. And if people like what we do, they can follow us and sign up for our updates or even make a donation.
Great. Well, thanks again for coming on, Colin. I always appreciate it, and I really do like the work you're doing and just bringing this to more palatable. You know, it's not a big, long academic paper, stuff like that, though we need those things too, but it's some good first-person accounts. So thanks for putting it together, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Well, thanks a lot, Cory. Appreciate it.
Great. So yeah, that was Colin Craig of secondstreet.org. And yeah, they've done a lot of work on healthcare and talking to people with that and outcomes and so on. I like that format. I like reaching out to people who actually lived it. You know, when we've just talk about theoretical stuff, when we look through textbooks, when we look through academic papers, essays, which all have some degree of value, a lot of things come out again, much better in theory than they do in practice, and socialism is a very common one. I honestly believe a lot of the people who pushed and got those countries into socialism and communism really thought they were doing good. They really did. They didn't begin as being evil. I'm sure some of them were, but for the most part, they really thought it was the way to go. And they based it on reading stuff like Marx and Engels and, Das Kapital and other garbage like that. I mean, it's written as if it's a viable sort of theory. And sure, I guess you got to start something with a theory. But again, it's shown in practice, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And that number one thing, that point to point out, as Colin did, as I did, nobody is ever scrambling, trying to escape free market capitalist nations. Not only because they don't want to escape, which is a big part of it, but the nations don't try to stop them because they don't have to cork that bottle. A commonality in extreme socialist states always is having to lock your citizens in, because people with ambition, people who want more, people who want to do better will leave. That's just the natural way of it. So, I mean, yes, they put themselves at terrible risk trying to leave Cuba. Or we still remember those images of people climbing over barbed wire, getting ripped to shreds, trying to escape East Berlin. The Soviet Union, they put up the Iron Curtain. It's the first thing they did. North Korea, they're locking their citizens in and keeping them from talking to others. If your system is any damn good, you shouldn't have to force your citizens to stay within it. That's another meme. I love memes. They get big messages across in small ways sometimes. There's that one that says, socialism idea is so good, they have to be mandatory. You can't get people to voluntarily buy into socialism. You always have to put a gun to the head of the citizenry to do it. It's just right there should set off alarm bells. And it's sneaky and it's incremental. As Colin said too, the first thing they go after is speech. And it's good to hear from people who lived through it. They lived in those nations. They understand. A government that wants to control its people knows that they can't allow free speech. That's one of their biggest threats. Free speech, free media, free information. You won't find a socialist country that doesn't have a form of pravda. What do we got in Canada? Somebody else mentioned it earlier. CBC. Yes, the Canadian Socialist Network. And for $1.5 billion a year, plus stolen advertising dollars, that vulgarity of an institution pumps out boundless, content and policies promoting far-left socialism. Go figure. This is where they go. This is where they sneak it in. This is where they train us. This is where they indoctrinate us. And what are they doing on the other side? They're trying to control the other media. For those who didn't catch it, I ran that panel interview we did yesterday with Sheila Gunn-Reid from Rebel News and Andrew Lawton from True North, because we're all independent outlets and we're all doing quite well. I mean, people are tiring of the mainstream media and the crap we're being fed. And the mainstream media is this is the way the government's doing it. They're with a carrot and a stick. They started with the carrot. Let's get in and get all of these media outlets dependent on us. So, I mean, aside from the CBC that always was, they put out $600 million in subsidies, and then they carry on more subsidies and more programs and more bailouts. And now all of these media outlets are beholden to the government. You don't want to rock the government boat or they'll pull the rug out from underneath you. And then the government starts as well with, we're going to determine what is or isn't a real media outlet. So they put through those processes and they said, you know what, Rebel isn't, so they don't qualify. And, I don't think they care either way. They also said with the Western Standard that we are. I think the government wants to approve most of these outlets to say, we've given you the stamp of approval, not that we wanted it or needed it. Because once they show that example and they show the example that they wouldn't give it to another one, it's reminding all the others, hey, yeah, we consider you an approved outlet for now, but you watch it. We'll do to you what we did with the Rebel. So you got to have a bad example. This is bad. This is government working to control media, working to control any messaging that gets to you. And it doesn't need to be done. It didn't need to be done. It's a solution in, searching for a problem. But here we are. And what do you see? That S word always is lingering in the background. Socialism. I mean, those mainstream outlets, they wouldn't probably talk that much in depth about things like survivors of socialism and things like that, because they don't want to upset their masters. What if you lose your subsidies? What if you don't get qualified to go into your reporters going into news conferences, don't have access to government ministers anymore? Because you need that original content. That's the hard thing. That's what we do here at the Standard. We've got original content. Dave Naylor, our news editor, makes sure we source our stuff. We get out there. Mel Risden, she's always hard at it. looking at her on the phone right now out there in the newsroom talking to somebody. We source our stuff, we get out there. It takes expenses, time, money, and if the government can hold you down and keep you from doing that, you're going to fade on the vine. So if you start losing access, that's another way that they control information. So it's a scary world, and this government is not working in our interests right now. Speaking of another way they're not working in our interests, of course, they're always trying to take away your firearms. There's one thing the Liberals despise. It's having Canadians have the right to enjoy firearms. And they're constantly under attack, constantly recategorizing them. You know, all your old hunting rifles, suddenly they're assault-style rifles, and we're going to steal them from you. And I call it stealing. Because again, if they're going to tell you that you have to give it to them without a choice, then it's theft. So you got to stand up for yourself, and you need groups for that. You need organizations for that. And one of those groups sponsors us, and that's the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. These guys have been sponsoring us for quite some time. I spoke one-on-one with Tony Bernardo, actually down at the gun show last weekend in Calgary. They're doing great work on behalf of Canadian firearm owners, you know, and they provide a whole bunch of resources. If you own firearms, if you're looking to get into firearms, these guys have it all there on their website, you know, videos, instructional things. Because, I mean, hey, firearms are fantastic, perfectly safe items to own. You know, as I said when I was at the show, I was surrounded by thousands of people and thousands of firearms, and I never felt safer in my life. Unfortunately, firearms in the hands of an idiot can be dangerous, you know, and, well, many things in the hands of an idiot, including a car, can be dangerous. So it takes training, it takes control, it takes responsibility. And the Canadian Shooting Sports Association offers videos and resources for all of those sorts of things, so you can responsibly enjoy your firearms. But they need you. They need your help, too, to keep helping, you know, with their court challenges against the Liberal government for your rights, things like that. So you got to get on board with them. Check them out, Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Their website is cssa-cila.org, and take out a membership with these guys, you know, because that's how they get the funding to be able to keep ensuring you have those rights. And I don't think anybody's looking to, you know, going off of them and more into my ranting then, but I don't think that anybody's looking to start an armed revolution by any means or any stuff like that. But the government sure fears it. That's why they want the firearms taken away. I mean, why else? When we look at the crime statistics, and we have those, crimes aren't committed by duck hunters, deer hunters. They aren't committed by firearm collectors. They aren't committed by the law-abiding firearm owners. Yet those are the ones that the Liberals are always targeting. The majority of these crimes are committed by people who have illegally imported guns or stolen guns. They have not gotten them on the legitimate market. They never had good interest in mind, and these are criminals. The government wants, again, to keep this people dependent on them. If you disarm citizens, you have no way now to defend yourself against these criminals. You're fully reliant on the states to defend you against them. Well, that's not really working out really well now, is it? And it's funny how they take their solutions and they go the totally wrong way. Calgary has record numbers of shootings going on in the streets right now. It's getting really bad. I mean, last night, some guy was shot to pieces up in Northeast Calgary. And I believe it's double the amount of shootings that have happened. But what do you hear from the usual progressive politicians? We got to control the guns. No, you morons. You got to control the criminals. And this is, it's getting clear. And this has always been the case in Calgary. We've had ups and downs. This is gang stuff going on, guys. These are criminal gangs doing these sorts of things, not law-abiding firearm owners. These aren't people grabbing the old duck gun from the basement and going and shooting their neighbor. So let's address this, but instead they just say that we want to crack down on the law-abiding people. These are the same twits that want to defund the police. We got shootings going on. I mean, that vehicle up there was peppered. We're talking dozens of shots were taken. Thankfully, I mean, somebody got killed, and that's not thankful at all. Thankfully, nobody else did in that particular incident. You know, the other one, execution style, right on 16th Avenue, they pulled up behind a vehicle and blew this guy's head off sitting in his vehicle, and it was targeted. It was gang-related. Let's admit these things. But no, the government is too focused on going after all the people who aren't committing crimes. Yes, we are in bizarro world. So I talked about, you know, I mean, we're in a world where English is apparently racist to use as a language even. So we can't expect rationality from our betters, apparently, on these things. There's something I want to talk about just as a side note to close out the week. If you're on Twitter, an account you must follow is Libs of TikTok. Okay, this is a Twitter account that's been around for a couple of years. They made a bunch of news recently because all they do is post videos of liberals being insane, being ridiculous, being absurd, and being over the edge. And of course, those videos go viral. Like, these guys are they lack self-awareness so much. They put out these TikTok videos, they put out this goofiness, and they think they're making a good point, but in reality, it's just some purple-haired lady ranting and raving into a camera, and we find it very comical, and we like to share those things and laugh about it. So libs of TikTok had built quite a following, and all they were doing, they didn't have much editorial comment of their own whatsoever. It was just a posting that shared other stuff. Well, this really pissed off the left. Why are you pissed off? All they're doing is sharing your stuff. You would have thought you'd be happy to have somebody sharing your stuff. You're getting it out there. You're getting the word out. Well, they got so upset, and this columnist with the Washington Post, Lorenz, her name is something Lorenz, she tracked down and doxed, for those not familiar with internet language, she found the identity of the person behind libs of TikTok and published it in a Washington Post piece. Plus, of course, accused them of a whole bunch of nasty things, which isn't true. All they're doing is posting your own stuff, feeding people, and feeding the liberals their own words. Boy, that upsets them, So there was that attack piece. And now, of course, she is playing victim. She's whining, she's howling, she's pissing and moaning. And if you look at her history, actually, she's kind of a crackpot anyways. She left the Times there as well with a big tantrum. But it made a lot of news. But what's great about it, and James pulled up that picture of the libs of TikTok, they've got almost a million followers on Twitter now, almost a million. I believe a week ago, they were only 600,000. So it's if people are familiar with the old term for the internet, the Streisand effect. And that was from way back when Barbara Streisand, this is the earlier days of the internet, but she had a house out in Malibu, a great big mansion or whatever. And some guy had a website that had a bunch of aerial photos of houses all over along in California and so on. And he just had them out there, a whole list of them. I think this picture, it turned out one of those aerial pictures was of Barbara Streisand's house. And it only had like 32 views or something. But somehow she found it. And she sued him. She went after him. She went hardcore court after him. And suddenly, his site that had like 20 or 30 views on Barbara Streisand's house had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people looking at that picture. It was brought to the front and center, and people got to see where Streisand's house was and what it looked like in the whole works. So in other words, Streisand having her little temper tantrum and snit had the opposite effect of what she wanted to do, and actually took a minor thing and made it huge. Well, this ding-dong with the Washington Post going after the libs of TikTok account has now turned that account from 600,000 followers to nearly 1 million, and I'm sure it's only going to go higher over the course of the next week or so, because I'm telling you, follow it. It's quite hilarious to see some of the bizarro videos that they managed to dig up, or people submit to them and they post on there. So check them out. Let's make sure to reward that Washington Post journalist for her good hard work by making sure a small site remains big. Okay, let's get on to our next guest there, and that's Dave Makichuk. He writes a lot of columns for us. He's written a lot of columns for publications for quite some time. I won't ask exactly how many years, but it's been a while. And we'll talk about some of the more recent stuff Dave wrote. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Pretty good, actually. It's still miserable. It's snowing. It looks like the snow stopped out there now, but
it has.
We're moving into spring. I rant, I rave and everything, but I'm not as upset as some people might think sometimes.
Yeah. Well, the farmers need the moisture. Let's face it. The farmers, the sloughs, the wildlife, they need that. They need the moisture. But in saying that, yeah, I hate it's a pain.
Well, I'd like to see the farmers get the moisture through rain.
Yeah, but we need rain. We need rain. Absolutely.
But it's one of the things beyond our control. One of the things that is within our control, and I know it's a subject we've been on a bit back and forth, but and it just won't seem to quite die, but is that thin blue line patch. It's still an issue right now. There's still kind of a passive-aggressive almost battle going on between City Hall and the police commission and the police union and the police officers themselves. And you wrote a column on that recently.
Yes, I did. And I'm firmly behind the officers in the line of duty. I'm totally behind them. And shock of all shocks, I'm totally behind Chief Neufeld in this. I think he's totally right. He said this was the straw that broke the camel's back. and he's being totally honest. And the police commission is not listening. This is not good. This is not good. I mean, I'm not going to bash either side, but I'm going to say this is not good, and maybe there needs to be some changes to the police commission, because again, we'll get into this deeper. But again, I'm behind the rank and file. I'm behind the rank and file. These are guys who put their lives on the line for us every day, you know, who get up in the morning and strap a gun on, for God's sake. And they don't know if they'll be home for dinner. They don't know if they'll make it home that night. Crime is always on the way up. And we're talking about, and again, this is not the hill to die on, which is what I mentioned in my column. This is a patch. This is a patch, for God's sake.
Well, that's it. And you said right in your column, I mean, you're not always supportive of everything the police do. It's nothing you're hung up on. It's just in this particular circumstance, as you said, why are you picking this bizarre hill to go after the police and die on? Because it's really demoralizing a lot of officers and upsetting them. And I mean, if you want better behavior from the officers, keeping their morale up is one of the first steps in doing so.
Well, and of course, like, I've talked to friends about this. I didn't just, you know, I said, look, what do you think? What do you think? And they said, well, we have concerns. First off, it's the link to the so-called white supremacists in the United States and other bad links, and also that this is like a group that swore to enforce the rules, and now they're balking at a direct order, and also that this may lead to more problems down the road where they might not, or accountability. Or was it, abuse of power, so on and so forth. These are all the issues that put forth. But let me tell you something. I grew up in Windsor. And lived across from Detroit. And there were years where Detroit had 1,000 murders, 1,000 from crime, 1,000 murders. Imagine that. We have 11, and the media is having a heyday on it today. We have 11 homicides. 1,000. All you had to do was cross the border in the tunnel of the bridge to get to Windsor, where people leave their doors unlocked, where we might have 1 or 2 murders a year. Now, maybe that's changed. I know it's worse in Toronto now with the gangs, and gangs here too, and that kind of thing. But basically, if you've ever traveled, and I ask this to any one of the listeners, if you've ever traveled to the United States, you know it's different. The situation down there is different. The environment is different. The police are different. Sometimes they kind of shoot first, ask questions later. And the situation with the Black Lives Matter is terrible. The I can't breathe thing, I thought that was really awful, really terrible to see. I can't stand that video. And yes, I think all those things we have to recognize, but it's different. And to paint our entire police force with the same brush as the Americans is completely wrong. It's totally and completely wrong. And we should stop it. And again, the patch is not the same. The patch is different. This is a Canadian patch. Yes, there is a linkage. But as you may have known in your career and in my career, top-down management never works. It never works. You have to have buy-in. You don't overthink it. Rule number 1, don't overthink it. Keep it simple. Get buy-in, okay? Hash it out. Talk to it. I don't like this split between the police commission and police. And like I say, I back Neufeld on this 100%. I think he's right. I think this is, the cops have had to deal with COVID, have to deal with the stress of the job, and all these other issues, and morale, hurting morale. And don't get me wrong, the police should they have a little ways to go to build trust with the community and various sections of our community. I think, and that's what the commission should be saying. Look, guys, we don't really like this patch, but look, I tell you what, you keep the damn patch, but we want you to engage the community more. Let's try and, so, you know, this perceived thing where the cops are going to turn on us. Well, God, no. This is, you know, we overthink things. We overthink stuff all the time, and it's not the same. America, it's totally different, and I think we're overreacting. I think it's an overreaction.
Well, yeah, and we're
overreacting now.
I mean, nobody can deny that there's some officers who go out of control. That there have been officers who are racist. There have been officers doing very abhorrent things, and there's been cases where officers try to cover that up. We know that there's stuff to improve. There's stuff to get better. There's relationships to mend with the community. But yes. I mean, letting the woke constantly define what a symbol is or what it isn't. I mean, a couple recent examples is at one point that the OK symbol, they went, this is a secret racist symbol. It's really that ridiculous, but that was going around until finally, you know, enough pictures of left-wing politicians went around doing the exact symbol that, well, maybe it isn't. Yeah, I know, but these stupid rumors and things that they interpret later to be racist. And I read, I don't know if you caught that, you were busy at the start of my show, but there's actually a book that was talking about even using the English language makes you inherently racist. That's how nutty some of these people get. We know the majority of these officers were not wearing that patch to anything to do whatsoever with race. Why are we letting the lunatic fringe define what it is? Because if you get them a new symbol, because some people say, well, just make a new one. No, because these nuts are going to come around and they're going to say the new one's racist too. You got to draw a line somewhere. And as you said, this is a dumb hill to die on going after police.
I have a buddy of mine. He's got two sons. One is with the Canadian forces serving in Europe, in Latvia. And his other son is a CPS officer. And these are probably the best kids, some of the best kids. I mean, I'm so proud of both of them, and I'm sure their dad is too. These are kids that don't have an ounce of racism in their body. I mean, come on. And like you said, it's just a complete it's just, you know, it's just, you know, the whole woke thing is just taking us over, and we have to draw the line. We have to draw the line. And I'm sure we can find a solution to this. I think the commission has to come off its high horse a little bit and engage, you know, the chief. And like the chief said, we need to discuss issues. Is it really about a patch, or is it about something else? Is it something else? This whole woke culture that's invading us. It's all over us. It's invading us. And maybe that's what we have to fight. Social media and this woke culture that's overtaking us, which is, you know, I mean, come on, this is not, you know, we can do this. In other words, I'm trying to be positive and not, you know, slam anybody. I'm trying to be positive. I'd like to see the commission try and engage this issue for our sake, for your sake, for everybody's sake. Come on, guys, let's resolve this. This is not the hill to die on, for God's sake. And I was interested in finding out that this goes back to the 1850s, to the war in Crimea, where a Russian cavalry group charged a line of British troops, and the British troops held, as they often do, and they called it the Thin Red Line, and that's the actual famous lithograph that you can get. It's really fantastic painting. Well, and also, so this went through the ages, and then in the 1950s, some LA police, LAPD picked it up as a slogan, and then there was movies and television about the Thin Blue Line and so on and so forth. And yes, this is something that the police have to address, and they have addressed it. Can they do better? Yes. Are there bad apples maybe out there who need to be, you know, addressed? Yes, yes, as in every job. You name me a job that doesn't have bad apples, or a bad boss, or someone who just is, you know, they're collecting a salary and not doing anything. It's human nature. But for God's sake, let's not get our shirt in a knot over something so ridiculous as a patch. And I like the patch. Just so you know, confession, I collect military patches. I'm into the military stuff. I do a lot of columns and stories. I collect patches, and some of them are pretty risque. And they're on eBay, and you can buy them. and they're, you know, this is a different culture in the military. But I display them. I don't wear them in public. So that's a different thing entirely. But I think we have to keep this in perspective and not overthink it. That's what I'm saying. For God's sake, let's not this woke culture bulldoze us and turn us into enemies. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Stop it.
The division's not helping. Maybe we'll pivot away from that if you got some time here on your more recent column. You do write a lot on international items and military items and things like that. And you wrote a column on the Israel's Iron Beam laser weapon.
Yes. Incredible. As the headline says, it's a game changer. It's a game changer. Israel already has, I think, 2 or 3 methods of blocking rockets, and they have now come up with a laser weapon. It's called the Iron Beam. They have the iron. I forget I can't remember the other one they have, but they have all these other weapons, and this will be in concert with their other weapons of defense. I'm talking about, not and I think it's an incredible breakthrough in for the company's name, Raphael. And I'll probably be, I'm going to the military show in Paris in a few months, and I'll probably be talking to them and doing a follow-up on this, hopefully. And again, this thing can hit mortars out of the sky. A mortar, although a mortar's trajectory is predictable, a missile is not predictable, and it also has defensive capabilities. The fact it can knock out all those things it is remarkable. It's absolutely remarkable, and it's. I only wish that they would share this technology, and you know, with because it's a tremendous defensive shield that they now have developed, and you know, and not to get involved in the Israeli-Palestinian thing, but you know, the one thing you and I don't have to worry about, and again, what's happening in the world. Nobody's hitting us with rockets and missiles. Our life is pretty, you know, calm and safe over here. But in the Mideast and in other trouble spots, this will be a weapon. It's a defensive weapon, and it costs not $100,000 or $150,000 or $1 million per shot. It costs $3.50, the price of a coffee. That's it. So you can understand why there's a lot of interest in this particular defensive weapon.
Oh, it's just good to see something reported. You know, one thing we humans seem to be skilled at is finding more and more creative ways to kill each other. It's good to see some defensive developments anyways. And yeah, if anybody's had to learn about how to stop and defend themselves, I mean, years and decades of having incoming missiles and mortars raining on them, Israel had to work on some of this.
Absolutely. And Israel's not the only country. The Americans are working on it, I'm sure. The Chinese are working on it for sure. In fact, they may even be advanced in this area. But laser weapons are coming. It's Star Wars, and it's going to happen. And you know, I'm not saying that's a great thing, but that's where it's going. Unmanned and laser weapons, and you know, billions are being poured into that for R&D. You know, it would be great if some of that money went to help the world instead of developing advanced weapons, but it's a scary world out there. It's a scary world, and I think they have to keep proceeding with it, and they will. They will. The Navy, the Army, they're all going towards these kind of weapons. And, you know, what's really scary is these drone swarms where you have maybe 50 drones coming at you. What do you do then? You know, like how do you stop that? And how do you know which is carrying a weapon and which isn't? Which is, you know, I mean, it's we're getting into that, and you can buy these drones at Costco, for Christ's sake, and modify them. You know what I mean? So, like I say, everything is changing, and especially getting more deeper in technology and autonomous weapons and laser weapons. So anyway, that's just a small bit of what's happening today in that area.
Yeah, well, it was an interesting piece. So before I let you go, have you got more stuff on the cooker here? Or, I know we'll have stuff from you eventually, but
well, I just hope. I really, I'm glad that the Americans are. I mean, I make no bones about it. I hope Ukraine can last and last against this onslaught. And I'm glad that Biden is doing more to give them artillery. They're giving them artillery. And I heard a report yesterday that Ukraine actually has more tanks on the ground in Ukraine than Russia, and these have been donated from other countries. And I wish, although Trudeau talks tough, I'd like to see him do more. I'd like to see him do more. Time is so important. Time is running out for these people, and I hope and pray, and also that they give Putin a way out. Give him a way out of this and stop it somehow. I hope. How do you deal with a man like this? I don't know. It's unprecedented. Anyway,
well,
that's.
I just want to see it end. That's the main thing. All right. Well, thanks for coming to join us today, Dave. And I'm sure we'll talk again soon. I always appreciate it, and look forward to your stories on the Western Standard in the future.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks a lot, Cory. Take care now.
Hey there, Dave. So yes, that's Dave Makichuk, and again, you can find him on westernstandardonline.com. He writes very regular columns for us, and from a variety of things, a lot of international stuff quite often. But again, he comes a little closer home with things such as the thin blue line issue that's been just going on and on. You know, it's just such a ridiculous issue. I know some people are tired of talking about it, but it's not gone yet, I'm afraid. So we got to keep talking about it for the time being. Speaking of news that won't go away, here's an interesting one. I saw that on the Taxpayers Federation the other day, that the home equity tax, here it is again. I think this is the fourth time maybe that the Canadian Housing and Mortgage Corporation has been found poking around studying how to tax the equity of primary residences of Canadians. And of course, the government, it's the same story over and over again. And remember, the CM, the Canadian Mortgage Home Equity Corporation, that's an arm of the government. They're controlled by the government. They answer to the government. So don't pretend they're arm's length. Don't pretend anything they're doing isn't what the government wants to do. Now, the government always denies, we're not going to come steal your home equity. We're not going to come steal your home equity. But they commission study after study after study on how to steal your home equity. And I'm going to call it stealing, because they want to come in and take a chunk of the home that you worked, that you maintained, that you saved for, and you put your funds in, you gambled on you know, a large debt, and they're going to say it built some equity. You know what? We're going to take a chunk of it. And that's just, when does this end, guys? And how long? You know, of course, I mean, most of us here with our viewers are not people who are prone to believe in government and anything they say anyways. So when the government keeps saying we're not going to tax it, I think they're lying. They're lying through their teeth. Why do you keep studying this? Why do you keep poking your finger into this if you don't want to go there? Then I think these leaks are purposeful. They keep softening us up. They want us to accept that there's going to be a home equity tax soon. You know, when we're going to talk about some of the things, where the government's going, where it's, the term is the Great Reset. And we talk about socialism. We talk about big government. Look, guys, it's not a conspiracy. Trudeau's a moron. That's not a conspiracy. Everybody pretty much knows that. But he follows shallow, simple ideology. And some of that is he really believes that a nice, big socialist state will make everybody happy. Of course, as a trust fund baby who's never had to pay bills in his friggin' life, who lives in luxury on the taxpayer's dime already, he's not somebody who can relate to the pressures he's actually putting on the citizenry with his vapid, dangerous, and wretched policies. Now, there was a piece actually on Quillette the other day that was fantastic. And if you look up Quillette, you know, they tend to be long essays and long pieces. But one they talked about was we're creating, the whole world isn't, it's not just Canada, a multi-class system right now with real estate, the way it's been happening, where we've set real estate prices so far out of reach, your average person just can't get into the market anymore. Young people cannot get into the real estate market. When you got a $700,000 house and you got to save the down payment for that and make the mortgage and do all of that, bad chance for your average young person. So what's happening? Speculators are coming in, buying houses because the rental market's good for them, but then the rents go up and it just pressures. Now you got people paying and paying and paying and not even building equity. And that's a larger and larger group. It's a whole generation of people. So what does the government do? Again, you see, you know how this always ends up. Well, we'll take care of you guys. We'll build social housing. We'll have the government run the housing market. We'll take care of you. Welcome back to the row housing and apartments that you see in the old Soviet bloc, right? Welcome back to the slums that I've talked about, what you see in Buffalo, New York, or New York City, or a lot of those American centers where they made the projects and they said, we can build nice big apartment blocks because don't worry, nobody will starve. Everybody will be okay. And then there's going to be some homeowners who got in early who walk away quite well off because the value of a detached house is going to go through the roof. It already is. But it goes farther. And that piece does go into it. The problem comes all the way down predominantly on the municipal governments. Yes, those loony, woke nutbars who have managed to take over just about every city council in Canada as they fight on this density zealotry. And again, that piece, Quillette.com, check them out. It's magnificent. Because it's the same in every city. You see that pattern. It's going on in Australia. It's going on in Europe. It's going on in Canada and the United States, of course. They have this density obsession. And the reality is these high-density cities are expensive as all hell. They're terrible. They aren't helping people at all. And they're trying to strangle outward development. In Calgary, they regulate the market to death. I've talked to Shane Wenzel about that, as a home builder, and I've talked to others. It takes 8 years in Calgary. If say you've got, I don't know, it's well out of my type of thinking for money, but let me throw a number out of $100 million. You got a chunk of land you've got in mind, and you want to start a new development south of the city. You apply. Well, it'll be 8 years before you break ground on that on average in Calgary. 8 years. In the meantime, what else is going to happen? Plus, you got dozens and dozens of all these applications and studies and permits that you got to go through. Who's going to invest? The only way you're going to invest is if you get a massive return, which again, pushes the prices through the roof. Because at any time during those 8 years, you could have it rejected. So, I mean, this is happening in every city. It's happening all over the place. Plus, they're putting on all these crazy green regulations and this and that. It's not working. It's not working. There's only one way to bring down the cost of homes. You have to increase the supply. And the ones who are gatekeeping and choking the supply are municipal governments, ideologues like Ninchi and his prior council, and Gondek now under current one. I just got to look at this. Okay, so we got a commenter, Greg Murawski. Seems the Western Standard is getting heavily into our Rothschild, Schwab, Soros, Freeland, Trudeau's, Lewinsky, WEF, NWO, UN, WHO, Ukraine warmongering propaganda machine. No, you're wrong, Greg. It's the aliens. The aliens control us. That's what I'm putting out here. They put a chip in my head. And everybody else at the Western Standard, we're all part of the conspiracy. But hey, on the bright side, we aliens displaced the lizard people who were here prior that the Illuminati were controlling. So, back to reality, let's look at some other news. But I do appreciate the comments. They help me along with my talk. Home equity, yes, watch out for your things. What else have we got? I'm just scrolling through. Here's the feds and controlling your things. By the way, speaking of government incompetence and how they run things, yes, data breaches. I think that might have been reported in the news already. One a day. The feds, with your federal departments and agencies that manage you, your information, everything about you, the government that we entrust, or maybe we don't trust, but we don't have a choice, and they have our information. Once a day, they have a data breach. And people wonder why people don't trust government, why they don't want to give their information to them. That is a big part of the reason. So let's talk about another thing. Cryptocurrencies. May as well talk about another way you can distance yourself, your assets, your money from the government. Nothing's foolproof, but boy, this is a heck of a lot more work for them to try and get at you than other ones, and that's through things like Bitcoin. And BitcoinWell.com are a Canadian company. They're a Western company. Hey, if you're worried about trust, these are guys that you can talk to one-on-one and see if it's for you. You see, you work hard for that money. It's bad enough the government's stealing it all the time. You don't want some scam artist to hit you. You're not familiar with new currencies and all that, and it's brand new. Who is really familiar? This is what these guys are about. They have an online Bitcoin Academy, they call it. Courses online to learn what it's about. How do you set up your wallet? How can you pay bills with it? How can you set money aside? Is it safe? They will answer your questions directly one-on-one with a real person. They'll help you set up and get involved in it. And it's non-custodial, which means they never have your money. You know, they make their money. There's always a fee, of course, but they don't have the Bitcoin money that you have. That's always yours. That's always in your hands. It's always in your control. So check them out, guys. Bitcoinwell.com. They are a fantastic sponsor, and they do provide a good service. So check them out. They are helping us pay our bills, and that way we can eventually get enough stuff for our flux capacitor and take the spaceship back to Mars where we belong. So, yeah, and data breaches. So people worry about government getting at your funds and things and so on and hacking your Bitcoin thing. Again, this is a government that they can't even get their payroll system right. I don't think they're going to get into your cold digital currency wallet anytime soon or too easily. I'm going to wrap things up, though. I think I've ranted out things quite enough. I've got, for those who caught it this morning, Danielle Smith was on at 9 a.m. She's going to be doing that Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And tomorrow is her first long-form show with us. She's going to have a guest, and she's going to talk for an hour and a half. And that's tomorrow at 9 o'clock again in the morning. An hour and a half show live with Danielle Smith. It'll be on the Western Standard Channel. Be sure to check that out. I mean, Danielle's great. You know, I know some people get upset with some of her past activities politically and so on. Whatever. She's more than welcome to talk to people about that. She always has. And but she's done fantastic in my view, anyways, in media, and does some great deep dives. I'm looking forward to that. You know, a good long form conversation. She wants to be able to do those deep ones, not the little ones like myself. Then on Monday, I'll be back, of course, at 11:30 a.m. I'm going to have David Clement from the Consumer Choice Center. And we are going to talk a little bit more real estate stuff because the government's trying some rather bizarre things to help you get into the whole home market. They seem to understand there's a problem, but don't seem to really want to fix it. And the leader of the Ontario Party, Derek Sloan, is going to come on because the Ontario election is actually coming up pretty soon. Things are ramping up. And, well, let's see what's happening out there, what's being offered besides Ford, because I think Ford has really annoyed a great deal of small C conservatives, and people are looking for alternatives. Well, Sloan is one of the alternatives anyways, so it'll be an interesting conversation. We're looking forward to that. And, of course, I'll be ranting about something and going on. It all depends on what the 5G towers tell me to do that day, but I'm certain I'll have something we should cover. So thank you all for tuning in, guys. I do appreciate it, and I will see you all on Monday at 11:30 a.m. sharp.